might think that. You might think, oh wow, they're at 5 and 11, and they're up there, the Capitol recording and all that kind of stuff. And so, like, on election night, she's going to be, all the reporters can be working at different campaign headquarters, but she's going to be at one of the big ones.
Yeah.
So, like, for the governor's race, I can't remember if she, but, she was either with Lamont or with Stefanowski, obviously. And then, everybody else is like doing, I was like, I wonder what small race I'll get to do.
What did you get to do?
No, well, you know what I got, and it actually ended up being a big story. Just as by luck of the draw, I just got polling issues, and there were a lot of them that
Yeah.
night. Polling issues, you never know. Some nights it's like very smooth, and you're like, and it feels
So you
smooth.
had the New Haven wet ballots?
I was down there, right? But so yeah, some nights you do that, and you're like, oh, everything went smooth. What's back to you? And you're like, why am I even out here? But then that night, if there's something that goes wrong, it's going to be like the big story of the night, and that was the girl.
So that had to have been kind of like fun for you.
It was interesting. It was just sort of like it was interesting. I never saw anything like that, and I've covered enough elections. It was sort of a bizarre one. But even before that, there were some issues with people. Like, what was one deal? One of the polling places really screwed up. Like, they had the
Wrong ballots.
They had the wrong list, but they had the wrong voter rolls. And so, like, people were coming in, and they were like, they were saying,
I don't really have any authority, but I'm going to say sure.
I think so. But other than the reserved ones, I think you're good to go anywhere.
All right, great.
Again, we're not authority either, but you should just blame it on us.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah,
that's
the
front row here.
voting rolls, and like people are coming in.
Was that in Stanford or?
No, it was farther. I don't think it was Maryland or something. They did eventually get it straightened out, but it led to longer lines, and I'm sure that there are some people that were just like, forget it, turned around and voted, which is sad, obviously.
Actually, no. That might have been Middletown?
It may have been Middletown. I've seen that. And like they were still like, even because one thing that at least they did realize is like once it happened a couple times, they realized like, okay, something's up. Like no one's all these people are just showing up. So they were like having them do provisional ballots, I think is how they worked it, and they still were able to vote, but it slowed everything down because they had to go into a different line, and it really messed stuff up, especially like for people. I think what it really got bad was like around like the lunchtime elections when they really were announcing it, and that was when it was completely blind. By like 5 or 6, they had somebody like rush down somehow with like a new correct list, and I'm like, really? They can't just print it out somewhere? But I think they had to go up to Hartford to like the Secretary of State's office. I remember calling the Secretary of State's office, one of the communication people there is like, hey, off the record, like this is their screw up,
What's up? You ready?
Yeah, I didn't grab dinner, so I'm like watching real quick. I have a bunch of people. We'll see.
Alright.
So
Ben,
I want to
sit right there.
Sorry?
Am I allowed to sit here?
We'll see. I hit up like everyone that would be interested.
What?
I hit up everyone who would be interested.
I would be there.
There was some controversy started where I'm currently.
So how's it going with Jasmine depression? Yeah, I didn't know if anybody occasionally with these things people show up to protest too. I don't know if that's
Why not?
Yeah, exactly. That's where I'm at, right?
I posted some around back in this direction.
The video that you shared was Brandon's video, right? Or was it another video?
I just like cut it to make it like shorter.
Which I saw you could argue that was because like before, not that I'm not saying it was a good video, but the question is who like I think people are more likely to watch a 1 to 2 minute video as opposed to a 6 minute video.
That was our intention.
Yeah.
So we just cut the parts of our best.
Saying for future events, let's remove.
That was not our original question. We had different one, but like different one. Yeah, the statistics that we're talking about.
I guess it's racist to have statistics about another race. The program.
And so like the Celeste would take down or
They wouldn't print our posters. Even though it was not even our own stats. It was actually special design.
Say stifle free speech on your campus.
They're allowed to take questions.
Well, it's not something where it's more of a safety concern that people would
Just
I
wait.
feel so sad because
You put yourself on a pedestal to get Trinity.
Do you
It'll
guys
happen.
get threatened?
reach out to me.
Or you
Oh, I
just
know
get
you can
called
do blast him, you can
racist?
blast mine.
Well, I mean, it's like I mean, there's a piece in the AP.
I'm excited about this.
I got a proven lawsuit being
Okay,
a no proof on campus.
why are you working
Nick and I both
And
just
just
like
TC
kind
claims
of
that
opposite people wrong.
Easy claim.
yeah,
Oh.
yeah. But no,
Dude, it's absurd. Like I wrote an article about just purely based on economic theory, not like political theory,
That's
Right.
why
about
to sit down.
the very well established fact that minimum wage hurts the worst off, which is a very mainstream,
Guess what? You did the best you could at that.
well
Give it a time, so
established point within economics. This is a fact.
Liberal groups have done that study and they've proven that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Same
this
thing.
is a fact. So I wrote about that in the student newspaper and I got
you were said
ripped
because of
apart.
white privilege, your opinion and statistics cannot be valid, right? Something like that.
It was the opinion editor, no less.
Oh no, the opinion editor came after me, but he like ignored my argument and called me like some, entitled frat boy or whatever. So
Do you feel like more people would join your organizations and stuff, but they don't want the
Yeah.
roll back?
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly.
who are you?
squeaking in dinner over here.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Hey,
Nice to see you. How's everything?
one faction over the other. I have to tell you. Yeah, I don't think you were there.
Got it. Oh, the one that they had in here, like a few weeks ago.
Oh yeah.
2 weeks ago in
Hello?
Washington.
Oh great.
Uh,
Yeah.
Okay, they passed it.
Hey, all right, I'm coming up right now.
Yeah, so we are party affiliation. They said he's the interim. I said, of course I can give it to him. So,
Okay.
and I read it verbatim. And I said, you know what? This country's so great to me. And I said to the deans were there. I'm not even a first generation. I came here. I wrote the play. I came here. And I love this country because of the freedom that exists here. Don't you love to say that we can disagree and without fear of incarceration to speak in our names or incarceration or something worse? So let's have a discussion. Let's have, yeah, let's have a civilized, civil, respectful conversation. Very
Can I take down either your email or your cell? Because I'd love to contact you for a bigger story you might be doing later, just on conservatives on college campuses.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's your number?
240 812
812
21
21
88.
88. And I'll shoot you a text, yeah.
Yeah. I've also got some. I'm the president of Dream Tech here, so
Good. Okay.
anything I do.
And what's your first name?
Jake.
Okay, cool. I'll send you a text. I appreciate it.
Oh yeah, I'm good.
I know like things are going on, but
Yeah.
Alrighty.
excited about graduating?
Yeah. I'm excited.
Oh my goodness.
It's like a big day, but I'm not excited.
Yeah.
Where are you gonna be living?
We'll see. I was down yet.
Where are you living?
Haven't quite basically opportunity. Yeah, I'm not too worried about it. I've got a few backup plans. I'm gonna go back to that sleeping. So I was before me. So if I don't get a job in grad, I'll go back. My rock fire guy. It's a good spot. Yeah, I was talking to you earlier.
Oh yeah, no, that's what
I did I did like a speech for the president, like these student speakers, and so I was like sitting there when this other girl was asking me all these totally fine with everything, like she was seeing her and selected, and she like we were talking about yeah, but this girl was like that sucks. I can relate to that. Like I was like I'm ready to go. Like she was like I practiced like 1,000 times. I was like really? I was like I've read my speech 3 times and I've got it basically memorized and I was just like felt like I was the nerves. I have to imagine like if you're doing something like that without like completely pulling up for it. Have you heard of Straka?
You got some literature for you guys have?
That's awesome. Oh wow. Do you get paid for anything? Or no, just yeah. How is there any way to like manipulate that into
Hello, everybody. I'm Dean Selders from the Dean of Students Office. What's up?
What's up?
What's up? Thank you, thank you. Back in the back. I like that back in the back sound like that. Want just to say a few words and then hand it off to Nick and to introduce our guest speaker. One of the reasons I love Trinity College is it's a part of the liberal arts tradition. Anybody heard that around here? You've heard about the liberal arts? The idea that there's the pursuit of knowledge and information that somehow impacts one's own moral compass. Liberal arts says that get a little bit of math, get a little bit of science, get a little bit of English, get a little bit of spelling. Spell check. Thank God for spell check. Right? But that you mix that all together and you come out a better person. So that corporations and organizations and places of work and business find you the most compelling, the right candidate for their jobs, right? Because that's what we do. We come to school, get an education, and go to work. I love the liberal arts because it is in this context, it is in the tradition of the liberal arts that we can have robust conversations about all matters of stuff, both political and philosophical. We can be on the left, we can be on the right, we can be in the middle, we can be none of the above. If I was at church and somebody say amen. We can do it all. So I'm appreciative that we can have conversations and discussions and events like these where we can actually do some deep listening. Can I say one more word? I think you come to these kinds of things for understanding. And I think to have understanding, you have to have a little humility. What I mean by that is understanding. Understanding. 2 words, under and standing. Somehow or another, there's a little submission to the fact that you are here to learn, to listen. And I think you can approach listening and active listening in a very real way, without a little bit of humility. So can I get you everybody to just go in your pocket, grab your humble P.O. box, take one, pop it, drink your water, down it, and let's have a good time in conversation. All right? Good.
I'll be back. Well, thank you guys for coming. I'm really excited. This is our first event of the year and first event under new leadership. The College Republicans Club at Trinity hasn't been around for the past few years, so I'm really excited to restart that and get some excitement going and really have our first event. So I wanted to thank, first off, alum Elizabeth Peterson for putting this together and getting our contact with Brandon Straka. She was class of '91. She was president of College Republicans when she was here. Really great connection. We're really happy to have her here. I'd also like to thank our vice chair, Daniel Nesbitt, who also helped put this together, and then Kyle Welch, who helped with all of our media and digital marketing for this event. Before we get to an introduction, I also want to touch upon what Dean Selders talked about, which is that really the point of this event is to have an open dialogue, right? Whether you agree or disagree with this event, we want you to leave here thinking about one thing, which is how does identity play into politics? How does your identity play into politics? And we really want you to think about that and take that message when you leave here. So without further ado, Brandon Straka received national attention after his YouTube video, Walk Away, which we're going to play for you, went viral. Brandon Straka is a leader in the Walk Away movement and talks about how minority groups, specifically the LGBT community and brown and black people, have really been under oppression within the Democratic Party. Today we're going to hear him speak. We're going to talk about his movement, and we hope you guys leave here well informed. Thank you so much. Let's watch the video.
I was a liberal. Well, to be honest, less than a year ago, I was still a liberal. I became a liberal because I felt I'd found a tribe whose values aligned with my own. I staunchly reject racism of any kind. I reject the marginalization of any human being based off of their gender or sexual orientation. I reject tyrannical groupthink. I reject a system which allows an ambitious, misinformed, and dogmatic mob to suppress free speech, create false narratives, and apathetically steamroll over the truth. I reject the acceptance of junk science and superstition to advance ideological agendas. I reject hate. These are the reasons why I became a liberal. And these are the same reasons why I am now walking away. For years now, I have watched as the left has devolved into intolerant, inflexible, illogical, hateful, misguided, ill-informed, un-American, hypocritical, menacing, callous, ignorant, narrow-minded, and at times, blatantly fascistic behavior and rhetoric. Liberalism has been co-opted and absorbed by the very characteristics it claims to fight against. For years now, I've watched as people on the left have become anesthetized to their own prejudices and bigotry, and the prejudices and bigotry of those around them who echo their values. I have watched as formerly sensible people who claim to reject racism have come to embrace the principles of universally hating and blaming all of society's problems on all people who have white skin. I have witnessed the irony of advocacy for gender equality morph into blatant hatred and intolerance of men and masculinity. I have seen the once earnest fight for equality for the LGBT community mutate into an illogical demonization of heteronormativity and the push to vilify and attack our conventional concepts of gender. These same self-proclaimed victims of intolerance now turning on the gay community that they attached themselves to advance their agenda, now calling gay people privileged and themselves have watched as the left has allowed themselves to become hypnotized by false narratives and conclusions, perpetuated by social justice warriors who misrepresent and misconstrue facts, evidence, and events to confirm their own biases that everyone who does not comply with their prejudicial conclusions and follow their orders is a racist, a bigot, a Nazi, a white supremacist, homophobic, Islamophobic, xenophobic, misogynistic, and alt-right extremist. And I've watched as they've used these heartless and carelessly assigned labels to intimidate, threaten, bully, silence, attack, unemploy, blacklist, and destroy anybody who dares to fight back. They'll come for me, and then they'll come for you. And worst of all, the Democratic Party and the liberal media has embraced, affirmed, aided, and abetted this cult ideology. In an effort to gain voters and maintain power, the Democratic Party that I once loved has joined forces with the extremist left. The Democratic Party and the liberal media now believe their own ill-gotten conclusions and have ominously decided that they, and only they, know the remedy for society's ills. The left has decided that the solution to problems with race relations in America is more racism. The left believes that attacking, insulting, and dehumanizing one group of people elevates another. The left now believes that there are no boundaries when telling lies, omitting the truth, or misrepresenting facts when telling the news, because their end justifies their means. The left has now decided that its point of view is the only acceptable one, and that suppressing, censoring, and banning open dialogue and debate is virtuous and progressive. The Democratic Party has adopted a deleterious belief system happily and without skepticism, separating people into groups based off of identity and then organizing them into camps of victims and oppressors. If you are a person of color, an LGBT person, a woman, or an American immigrant, the Democratic Party wants you to know that you are a victim and destined to stay that way. They will insist that you are a victim doomed to exist within a system that is rigged against you, that you are a victim of systemic oppression, that you are a victim of your circumstances, and that no amount of hard work or motivational action will ever allow you to overcome your victimhood or the privilege of those around you. This is perhaps the Democratic Party's greatest and most insidious lie. But if you are a minority in America today, the left-wing politicians and the liberal media don't want you to ever discover this lie. So they bombard us with stories designed to reinforce the narrative that you are in danger, that you cannot succeed. They manipulate your fears and concerns by telling you that you are disadvantaged, disempowered, and disposable to everyone except them. They will tell you that you need them. They will tell you that you are only safe under their supervision. They will promise to liberate you from all that chains you. And then they will do absolutely nothing for you. Once upon a time, I was a liberal. But liberalism has changed, and I will no longer be a part of an ideology or political party that represents everything that contradicts my values of unity, equal opportunity, personal empowerment, compassion, and love. So I am walking away, and I encourage all of you to do the same. Walk away.
Hey everybody. Can I walk around? Okay. Good. Hey, what's up everybody? I'm Brandon Straka. I started the Walkaway campaign. I want to thank you all so much for hosting me here this evening. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Liz. Thank you very much. And, Tucker Carlson went to school here. Is this true? Oh God, that's so cool. Used to hate Tucker. Now I love it. So as most of you probably know, I guess at this point, I'm a former liberal and a former Democrat, and I guess part of my story is that I grew up in rural Nebraska, and I grew up in a pretty homophobic era of our country, and so I feel like by default, I always sort of fell toward a more liberal camp, and by
by default, I also fell into being a member of the Democratic Party. As an adult, I always voted Democrat. And the reason why is because I feel like I fell for the marketing of the Democratic Party, which I think has done an amazingly effective job at marketing themselves toward minority groups in America and telling them that they are hated on the right, that Republicans are all racist and bigots, that they're not wanted, that there is no seat at the table if you are black or brown or LGBT or even a woman, which makes absolutely no sense. But to be clear, I'm not denying the fact that racism has ever existed. I'm not denying the fact that homophobia has ever existed. And I'm not denying the fact that Republicans have been involved in some ugly behavior, I think, and some ugly policies throughout the years. But what my eyes have been open to, I think at this point, is that we are living in a world that is controlled by a narrative. And this narrative is created by the liberal media, and it exists everywhere. It's in our movies, it's in our music, it's in academia, it's certainly on the news that we read every day, or that we see on television, or that we gravitate towards when we click on Facebook or Twitter, or that are shared by our friends. We are being fed a narrative on a constant basis, and that has never been more apparent than after the election of Donald Trump. But I'm already getting ahead of myself, so I want to dial back just a little bit. Come on in. Please join us. How are you? I voted for Hillary Clinton. And I voted for Hillary Clinton because I believed that she was the most prepared candidate. The media that I had trusted my entire life had told me that Barack Obama had been an incredible savior for everybody in the United States, that he had a scandal-free presidency, that this guy was a messiah who did absolutely no wrong, and that if anybody criticized him, it was because, of course, they were a racist. And when people criticized Hillary Clinton or said, we don't want more of the same, then they naturally gravitated toward the narrative that that's because you're a sexist, you hate women. It couldn't possibly be because she and her husband have decades and decades of documented corruption, or that she would be basically just bringing upon the United States 8 more years or 4 more years of exactly the same things that Barack Obama did, that had caused so many people to lose that faith and that hope and change that he had promised them. But it was really, I think, the culture surrounding, I moved to New York City after I graduated from high school in rural Nebraska. I wanted to be an actor, I wanted to be a singer, and so I came to New York and I wanted to just live an open life. I wanted to be gay. Oh, I'm sorry, I know it's obvious, but I'm gay, and so I wanted to just be openly gay and live my life and do my thing, and I wanted to be around people that I thought understood me and supported me. And so I gravitated toward a very liberal city and a very liberal set of people. And so in that way, I think existed in a bubble, as so we all do to a certain degree. But I mean, certainly I think if you're a minority and you're living in a city, you're going to gravitate to a very specific bubble. I felt safe and comfortable within this bubble. But then I started, as time went on, to feel the culture changing. I felt it, and I could hear it, and I could see it in ways that were making me feel ever more uncomfortable. I didn't feel like we were becoming more united as people. I felt like we were becoming more divided as people, and I started to hear this language suddenly that I was never really hearing before. I started to hear constantly about privilege, this terminology, white privilege, victimhood. These things started to creep more and more and more into the culture. I started being told that I was privileged, and I didn't really understand why, because I come from a poor family in Nebraska. I was poor as an adult. I didn't go to college. I was working for oftentimes below minimum wage, working in restaurants. And I'm not denying that there are privileges to being white. There are privileges to being white, just like there are privileges to being black, just like there are privileges to being gay. No matter what you identify as, there are things that you can get away with that no one else can get away with. And certainly some of these things are very, very significant too. I don't believe that white people in our culture get away with more than other people in our culture get away with. In fact, I think it's quite the opposite. But we can get into that later too. For me, a big turning point was around 2015. I was always sort of on the front lines of the gay rights movement. I was fighting for whatever the cause was, even leading up to gay marriage. I mean, there was a time when housing discrimination laws existed, things like this. I was always on the front lines fighting for equality within the gay community. And then when we got to the point where we were fighting for marriage equality, that sort of seemed like a final hurdle to me. That seemed like a finish line. It seemed like, okay, if we can have success here, if we can attain equal marital rights, that's it. I mean, we as a marginalized group as gay people have sort of attained the equality legally that we're looking for, that we were hoping for. And in 2015, the Supreme Court decided that marriage equality was going to be the law of the land. And I thought, this is great. You know, I was never a person, even as in my most liberal days, I always said, I don't need everyone to love or support or accept or celebrate the fact that I'm gay. I just want to have the same rights under the law as everybody else. I want to be able to go to City Hall and sign a civil marriage contract with the person that I want to spend the rest of my life with, the same way that an opposite sex couple does. I don't need everybody to say that's great. I don't need people to celebrate it. I don't need people to love that. That is a choice that I have. I just legally want to have that choice. So in 2015, when the Supreme Court decided that marriage equality was the law of the land, I thought, this is great. We've crossed this finish line. But something absolutely peculiar began to happen within my own community. Rather than, you know, kind of like holding hands and celebrating crossing that finish line together, I started to see more and more splintering, micro splintering, into these illogical groups and just absolutely bizarre terminology that I suddenly was starting to hear about non-binary people. I started to hear terms like gender queer and gender fluid and all these new conditions that never existed before until we got basically to 2015 and marriage equality. And I thought, well, this is weird. I mean, I don't really understand what's happening here, but I didn't get it, and I didn't really think that much of it, but I knew that it made me feel very uncomfortable. It was around 2016, but before the election, I believe, when the Huffington Post, they used to have kind of like a subsection that they called Huffington Post Gay Voices. And I was always just mortified by everything that I would see, even as a liberal, just completely mortified, because rather than like printing uplifting stories about our community, about like even me right now, they would never dare tell a story about Brandon Straka, a gay man who started a movement that's, you know, and being embraced by conservatives. They're too busy telling stories about like how to enjoy fisting more, you know, and like ways, yeah, seriously, and you know, like ways to enjoy group sex, and it just absolutely repellent, disgusting things. And I'm like, my God, is this how we want to be seen by the rest of the world as a community? Is this really what the gay community is about? Can they not please publish something even slightly dignified about my community? So I had many battles with Huffington Post Gay Voices over the years, you know, writing back responses to the pieces that they put out. But it was sometime around 2016 that they put out a piece in which they made an announcement, and they said, from now on, we will no longer be Huffington Post Gay Voices. We are now Huffington Post Queer Voices. And we feel like this is a really positive move for this community. And not only are we changing our name to Huffington Post Queer Voices, but we, from here on out, will be referring to LGBT people as queer people in the media, and we will be insisting that other media sources also refer to gay people as queer people. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, first of all, who decided this? When did we take a vote? And I must have been sick that day, because if I'd been there, I certainly would have taken advantage of the opportunity to explain that I don't want to be called queer. I don't want to be a part of this decision that somebody made on my behalf. For many of us in the gay community of a certain age or a certain geographical location growing up, the word queer is a word that many of us heard, is the last word that many of us heard before a fist came flying at our face. I think it's degrading, I think it's demeaning, I think it's low rent, I think it's embarrassing, and I don't want to be a part of this movement to call us all queer. I think it's disgusting when black people use the N-word. I don't think it's cool. I don't think anybody's taking back their power. I think you're degrading and demeaning yourselves, and I don't want to be a part of that happening to my community as well. So I expressed such when I wrote a letter back to Huffington Post Queer Voices explaining exactly how I felt. Now, I did this in the most respectful way. I used articulate English and, you know, I expressed a point of view without name calling, without being nasty. I just said in, you know, strong English language how I felt. Instantly, I was pounced. This happened on Facebook, their Facebook page. So people were able to respond to my comment. Instantly, I started being attacked out of the woodwork by all of these people who identify as non-binary, gender fluid, gender queer, all this stuff. And they were saying to me, Well, of course you don't want to be called queer because you're a privileged white gay man. Try being gender fluid, try being gender queer, try being a black, trans, lesbian, whatever. And I was just like, what the hell is happening? Like, what the hell is happening? We literally just got to this point that we have been fighting for decades. I mean, gay activists going back to the 60s and 70s, people who lived through hell and died, many of them, through hell, to get to this point of equality, which we have now attained. They don't want equality. Now suddenly, equality isn't good enough. Equality doesn't look good to people anymore. In fact, equality, I think, is so scary for so many people that they might now not be, they might have their victim status revoked, that we have to actually invent new conditions, and we have to invent new genders, and we have to invent all these new things that never existed before, so that we can remain under this LGBTQIIA plus 2 whatever, ever-growing acronym, so that we can remain a victim class status. And why? Because there is such a thing as an oppression industry. And this industry cannot survive unless you are a victim. How do these people at these nonprofit organizations who keep telling you you're in danger, you're in danger, you're in danger, how do they survive? If they don't keep convincing you that you live in an incredibly sexist, homophobic, racist world, and that you cannot go out to your mailbox without being shot at by a straight white man. So at the time, the light started to go on for me that something was very wrong, something was beginning to change, something that I couldn't any longer endure or be a part of. And I made a very specific choice that day and it broke my heart, to be very clear, it broke my heart, but I made a decision that day that though I will always be a gay man, I was born a gay man, I'll live a gay man, I will die a gay man, I don't want to be a part of this community anymore. And it was really hard for me because I was a person who was very immersed in this community. I lived in gay neighborhoods in New York. I worked in gay bars and gay restaurants, and I dated gay men. And I was like, everything in my life was very much about being a part of this community, but this community is changing. It's changing in a way that's ugly, and I need to find a way to live my life not having this be my identity, but growing out of it and finding something else, but something more, because I'm feeling this community being overtaken by a movement of hatred. And not even an honest hatred, a hatred that is literally based on myths and lies and false conditions that aren't real, that don't really exist. I wasn't quite over it by the end of 2016. I was still, riding the Hillary train, and so I voted for Hillary Clinton, and I believed everything that the liberal media had told me. I kept going back for more and more and more because I trusted the liberal media. I thought that they actually care about black people and brown people and LGBT people. I thought that they were the champions of marginalized minorities. I thought that Fox News was a station that was catered to racists and bigots. And I thought that they lied and contorted facts and contorted information, that they were bigots for ever criticizing Barack Obama. When Donald Trump won the election, I was shattered, absolutely shattered. I literally had to cancel my day the next day. I was working as a hairstylist, and I had to cancel all my appointments. And I cried. I spent most of the day crying, and I was going on social media, and I couldn't understand how this could happen for several reasons. First of all, because the media had convinced me that he was a racist and a bigot, and because they had also told us for so long that he had a 3% chance of winning. I think on election day they said a 1% chance of winning. They said that literally they said it was an impossibility that he could win. And since they had spent such a long time continuing this narrative of this morally deficient person who's so bigoted, it's so hateful, and then he won by such a large margin of the electorate, I thought to myself, my God, are we just living amongst covert bigots everywhere? And not only was I shattered and devastated because he had been elected president, but I was terrified. I mean, I was absolutely terrified. I mean, I spent weeks walking around the streets of New York City going, did you vote for him? Did you vote for him? Did you vote for him? I mean, because in my mind, I'm thinking, someone voted for him. Like, a whole lot of people voted for him. And if you voted for him, you knew you were voting for basically the second coming of Hitler. And how could you vote for the second coming of Hitler if you yourself don't obviously hate gay people or racial minorities or whatever? And so it was this very scary feeling of kind of walking around all the time not knowing who all these covert bigots were that we were existing amongst. And the news kept reinforcing this narrative that we were in so much danger, and the stories came out immediately, literally the night that he got elected. The Huffington Post, who I don't know why I went back to them after what they did. Oh, I forgot to tell the part, sorry. After all the non-binary people attacked me on Facebook, I got shut down, I got banned on Facebook for hate speech. They all reported me for hate speech because I said that I was objecting to being called queer, and because there was a mob of them that did this, Facebook banned me for hate speech. But I still went back to Huffington Post anyway, and the night of the election, at somewhere around 2 in the morning, I rolled over and I opened Huffington Post, and there was a picture of Donald Trump with a big headline on the top that said, "Nightmare, President Trump." And then below it was a subheadline that said, "Millions to lose their health insurance, civil rights to be rolled back, ... and other possible headlines from a Trump presidency." So they started predicting the future of what was going to happen and scaring us, literally the second that he got elected, putting out the scary, fear-mongering headlines. And so that it wasn't shortly, it was very shortly after that when, he started in office in January, and then very quickly the headlines started rolling out that he was going to sign executive orders rolling back gay rights, that he was going to reverse gay marriage. People were talking about him sending black people back to Africa. People were talking about Mike Pence putting gay people in concentration camps. And you guys, I believed every word of it. I really did. I mean, I was... at the very least, I was so fearful, I was so scared, and I couldn't understand what was happening. So I was taking to social media constantly and just posting, "Why did you do this? Why did you do this?" Because I grew up in Nebraska. I knew that a lot of my friends back home on Facebook had clearly voted for him. None of them would admit it. Everyone was very, very quiet about it. But I just kept asking the question, why? And a lot of my posts were very offensive too. I mean, I was posting like pictures of Melania Trump naked and that picture of her in the high heels naked. And I was like, "Our new first lady, aren't you guys so proud?" But no one would answer me. And one day, about 2 months after he'd been elected, I put a post on Facebook that said, "I will never be able to understand how you could watch this man stand before a cheering crowd and mock a reporter's disability and still go in that booth and vote for him. Like, what is wrong with you? What happened?" And finally, that day, somebody answered me in late January of 2017. This woman that had known me my whole life, she babysat me when I was literally a baby, reached out to me privately on Facebook, and she said, "Listen, I'm not trying to start anything with you here," because she and I had had so many fights over the years. Like, we'd been friends on Facebook for like 10 years, battled through the gay marriage, marriage equality stuff, civil rights stuff, because she's very staunch Christian conservative and she's very pro-traditional marriage. And so we'd had many, many battles over the years. She said, "Listen, I'm not trying to start anything with you. I'm just asking, have you seen this?" And she sent me a link to a YouTube video entitled "Debunking That Trump Mocked the Disabled Reporter." I saw the title of this YouTube video and I became instantly enraged. I thought, oh my God, this is so stupid. This is so dumb. This is more right-wing propaganda. This is more like brainwashing, conservative bullshit, and I cannot wait to watch this so I can then write her back and tell her how stupid she is for falling for this. And so I watched it, and what I saw next was about 5 or 6 minutes of footage of Donald Trump. It's a compilation of footage going back 10 years ago to even when he was on Larry King, long before he was ever running for president. Donald Trump doing that exact same voice and that exact same gesture as he did that day when he was mocking that reporter's disability. But the commonality was that in all of the scenarios and all the situations in which he was doing that voice and that gesture, he was imitating someone who was caught in a lie or doing something shady, or groveling because they had been caught doing something dishonest. And I couldn't wrap my head around what I was seeing, and I actually had this moment where I sort of felt like I was like dissociating from my body because my brain was saying, "Oh my God, I don't think he mocked that reporter's disability," but my heart kept saying, "But we hate him, but we hate him, but we hate him." And I wanted to hate him. I'd become so addicted, I think, and accustomed to hating him and placing, I think, such a sense of my own values about myself and my own morality in being superior to Donald Trump or a Trump supporter. I couldn't understand this. I was like, what am I looking at here? What is happening? So I watched it 3 times. And when I got done watching it the 3rd time, I just really couldn't make sense of it. So I shut my computer and I just sat there and I thought on it for a minute, and I was like, what is happening? What is going on? And so I told myself, look, you don't have to figure this out tonight. Just like, let it go. Just let it go. And so I decided to go to sleep and just try to forget about it, but I couldn't. I was thinking about it all night long, and I was just like, this is so weird because it's almost as if they tried to make me believe something that didn't happen, something that's really heinous and something that's really terrible, something that strikes, I think, into a chord into the heart of everything that we consider to be decent and good, and something that should be, I think, universally agreed upon as off limits, making fun of a disabled person. So I went to bed, and I couldn't sleep very well that night, but I woke up the next day, and I watched the clip again, and it was just crystal clear to me in that moment. I thought, okay, he didn't make fun of that reporter's disability. Clearly that's not, I mean, he was just being funny, like he's been funny many times before. And this time, it happened to be a person who was disabled, and CNN, in the midst of his flailing, froze him in this position, paused it and froze it, and threw a banner on the bottom that says, "Trump mocks reporter's disability." Why would they do that? I trusted CNN, I believed them. I thought that why would they make me believe he made fun of a disabled person if that didn't happen? This was driving me insane. So I went out and I started asking friends and fellow New Yorkers and coworkers what they thought about it. Because I knew that the majority of the people were feeling the way I was feeling. I mean, we'd been spending months being angry and outraged and scared because of this man being elected. And so I asked, and I instantly was met with a wall of hostility and contempt just for asking the question. People were saying, "What are you doing? Like, what do you do? Like, what, so you love Trump now? Why are you defending Donald Trump?" So I'm not defending Donald Trump. I'm trying to understand what happened here, because it seems like the media made something up that didn't really happen, and I'm trying to understand why they would do that and how this could happen. And the pushback that I was getting was so severe. I mean, there were people who were unfriending me on social media. There were people who were attacking me, and so it became very clear to me that I wasn't safe asking these questions. I wasn't safe having these conversations, even amongst close friends. So what I did, because I'm not the kind of person who can just let things go, I would get in bed at night after I worked, and I would just read stories and watch videos and search for examples of, or try to search for answers of what exactly it was that had happened. And I started finding the most fascinating things. I found stories and like YouTube videos that were uploaded by private individuals, groups of black people who went to Trump's rallies to support him, and when CNN got there, they cut them out of the shot so that it appeared that only white people were there, so that they could continue the narrative that these were racist, bigoted rallies that were only attended by white people who were racist and bigoted. And I started to discover more and more and more about this narrative that was being, the ways in which identity is manipulated by the left, by the liberal media, the way that they're using all of these ways in which we identify ourselves, black, brown, LGBT, woman, against us. They're manipulating us. They are scaring us to death to control our behavior and get us to vote the way they want us to vote and behave the way they want us to behave and do what they want us to do. And the more I discovered, the more this was blowing my mind, and the more unsafe I felt having these conversations with people. But I still tried, and I would kind of drip, drip, little questions on social media, and people started attacking me and saying that I had joined a cult. People started saying that I had been brainwashed. People started saying that I've been sober almost 5 years. People said, well, he's relapsed. He started drinking again. He started using drugs again. And I was like, wow, this is incredible to me. So many of these people have known me for 15, 20 more years, and we've been good friends. We've shared vacations together. We've shared amazing experiences together, and the loyalty is zero. I mean, it's like, because I dare to ask a question or step outside the box of the ideology that I'm supposed to be ensnared in simply because I'm gay, or simply because they see me as someone who needs to be fit inside a box based off of my identity. Vicious attacks, and completely cut off from these people. And bit by bit, I became a little bit more open and a little bit more willing to listen to the conservative point of view, which in the past I wasn't even willing to consider. I I was the kind of person who, if I was scrolling through social media or I was on YouTube and I saw just a clip of something with Tucker Carlson in it, or Judge Jeanine, or someone like that, I wouldn't even watch it. I was just like, oh, bigots, right-wing idiots, right? Wouldn't even watch it. Well, I started watching it. I started watching clips, and particularly Tucker. I love that I'm here. This is like so fitting. It's amazing. Particularly Tucker, because Tucker will actually have educated liberals on his show and debate them. PhDs, lawyers, you know, smart, intelligent, learned people who are Democrats or who are liberals, and they'll talk about issues. And when I would listen to Tucker debate them, I was just like, wow, the liberal point of view makes absolutely no sense. There's no substance. It's all artifice. It's all superficial. There's absolutely nothing there. And the conservative point of view makes so much more sense. And it's like actually based on logic and common sense. And I wasn't detecting an ounce of hatred. I wasn't detecting an ounce of bigotry. I mean, when Donald Trump announced that he was running for president, that he was going to build a wall, I remember getting a pit in my stomach. I remember just being like, a wall? Like, I was like, oh my God, that's the most racist thing I've ever heard in my life, a wall? And, you know, naturally I'm thinking, oh my God, to keep brown people out and to keep... And then I started listening to the conservative argument about keeping our country safe and about knowing who's in our country and being able to vet our own citizens. Don't we have the right as Americans to know who's in our own country? I mean, don't we have a right to know where they came from, what they want, what their intentions are, what diseases they bring with them, what their background is? Do they have a criminal history? Don't we have a right to know who's in our country with us? And I was like, of course we need a wall. Of course we need borders. Of course we need sovereignty. Of course we need a system of capitalism which allows people to pull themselves out of poverty. Of course rich people should be allowed to get rich and not have to give all their money away to people who don't do anything. And of course welfare keeps people suspended in a state of inability to really find their greatness, or inability to really rise above their condition and to try and to succeed and to make something out of their life. I mean, I think every person comes into this world with a light inside of them and something that they are meant to be here to contribute something to humanity and to the world. And the Democrat policies and systems keep so many people, particularly people of color, stuck in a system that never allows them to feel like they can be anything in this life or break free, not just because they keep them economically dependent, but because they keep telling them, you do not have a chance in this country because everything is stacked against you. Everything is designed systematically to ensure your failure. There's no point in even trying. And it's a lie. It's all a lie. Now, going back to the issue of homophobia for a second, that's a very real thing. Homophobia is a very real thing. And a lot of people, the question I get asked a lot is, how could you possibly support the Republican Party now when it was the Democrats who gave you marriage equality, and it was the Democrats who gave you this and okay. Yeah, let's talk about that for a second, because you know what? It was, first of all, what the Democrats have done for gay people in the last, 5, 6, 7 years is basically just undoing all of the policies that were created by Bill Clinton against gay people. The Defense of Marriage Act, Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I mean, so many policies were created by Bill Clinton that did damage to the gay community. And all the Democrat Party did was essentially wait until public acceptance of gay people got it to about 56 or 57%. And there was absolutely no risk whatsoever anymore. And they swept in and took credit for all of the hard work that so many gay activists had been doing for decades, going back to the 60s and going back to the 70s, people who really, really worked hard for these things. And the Democrats came in and said, boom, we did that. Boom, put their stamp on top of it. They didn't do anything. The Democrats did not do anything for gay people. They simply took credit for all of the work that gay activists had done for a very long time. Now, Republicans don't get any credit for being smart at that time. It was the most idiotic thing, I think, that they could have done at that period of time, say 6, 7 years ago, turning their party over to religious fundamentalists who were not keeping up with what people actually wanted, with the things that actually matter to people, which is jobs, economy, the ability to thrive, keeping America safe. I mean, getting involved in fighting gay marriage, I think, was one of the dumbest things that Republicans could have ever done. It was a losing battle. They never were going to win. And it allowed, I think, us to get to this point today where so many people can look at that and say, don't you see? Look, they're clearly the bigots, and the Democrats are clearly the good guys. It's a whole other speech for me. Hopefully you guys have learned at this point in your education about the truth about the Democratic Party and how they are, in fact, the KKK was an arm of the Democratic Party, and that they did, in fact, push back against most civil rights ordinances and things that happened in the 1960s. But I want to get back back to so it was around this time that I was taking in the conservative point of view and really understanding it for the first time and really accepting it. And then one of the final straws for me, well, there were actually two. One of the final straws for me was when a friend presented me with a video. I think it was from Vice News or something. It was about 5 or 6 minutes long, about a situation that was happening at a place called Evergreen College. Is anybody familiar with what happened at Evergreen College? Anyone? Yes? Okay. For anyone who doesn't know, Evergreen College is an incredibly progressive college. They regularly have these sort of initiatives that are designed to promote the progress of social justice and raise social awareness, whatever. And these things are things like, opting out days. If you're black, you should opt out so everyone can learn, blah, 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 whatever. And that's fine, okay, that's fine. But they decided to take it a step further a couple of years ago. And what they decided with that was that rather than have an opt-out day, they would have a mandatory day without a white person day. And how this worked was, if you were white, you had to stay home. And if you didn't stay home, it meant that you were a racist, basically, who was participating, who wasn't acknowledging the systemic oppression of black people, and that, of course, this makes you a racist and a bigot. And it was mandatory in the sense that, you would be shunned, you would have your reputation destroyed if you didn't participate. The school couldn't actually make you stay home. But they didn't have to worry about that because of the social pressures of progressivism at this school. You didn't really have a choice. Well, there was a professor at the school who was extremely liberal, extremely progressive, and he pushed back. And he said, look, guys, like these opt-out days, I think they're great, good. Like, I think that they have some benefit, and I think they have the ability to perhaps raise some awareness. But telling people that they can't participate in something because of the color of their skin is really not the message that I think we want to be sending to people. I think it's not a good idea. And he unleashed the fires of hell on himself for simply making that incredibly rational, incredibly reasonable, incredibly true point. He started getting attacked viciously by social justice warrior students at this school. There are many videos of them encircling him, screaming at him, throwing things at him, swearing at him, calling him names, and they demanded that he be fired. And basically, he ended up having to resign because the harassment was so intense and got so bad. My friend showed me this video, and it was the first time that it was really the dots were starting to connect for me. I was like, I get it. This is what liberalism is. It's using identity to bully other people. It's using identity to continue on this narrative to get what you want, which is what the media does. The media's, they're no dummies on the left. They've gotten a hold of this too. They realize that if they can continue the race baiting, they can continue the homophobic narrative, etc., that they can force an entire political party into submission, or at least they got away with it for a really long time, until the wonderful gift that is Donald Trump came into all of our lives. And I think just completely shredded this system that has been put in place, this toxic system that's been put in place, which is liberalism in America. It's disgusting. And so at that point, I made the decision, I'm done, I'm walking away. I'm walking away from the Democratic Party. I'm walking away from the ideology of liberalism that I've subscribed to for so long, which is a cult, by the way. And I'm walking away from this cult, and I'm walking into my personal power, my individual freedom. I'm still a gay man. As I said before, I'm as gay as I ever will be, but I am no longer going to be a part of this toxic ideology, which is I talked about a lot in this video. And so on May 26th of last year, I released that video that you all just saw, and I started something called the Walk Away campaign because I knew so many other people were feeling the same way that I was feeling. But people are afraid because we live in a society where the worst thing that can happen to you is to be branded a bigot or a racist or a hater or whatever, and this is how we control people. This is how we get people to do what we want. This is how Jussie Smollett gets a raise when he wants to get paid more money at his job. He says, MAGA people attack me because I'm black and I'm gay. More money, please. And nobody questions it. Nobody, and even when he gets caught, nobody does anything about it. He gets all charges dropped. He gets his case sealed. The whole system is set up to protect this toxic ideology of liberalism. It's repellent. And so I started this campaign, and it exploded out of the gate. I suddenly started hearing from literally thousands of people who said, thank God, I've been feeling this way for so long and I felt like I was alone. I felt like, every day I go to school and I hear people echoing these sentiments about privilege and victimhood and oppression and hierarchies and intersectionality and all of this nonsense, and I'm non-binary and gender fluid and all this crap. And thank God, finally somebody's standing up and speaking out and telling the truth. And within a matter of months, we had tens of thousands of people who had joined this campaign on Facebook. I encourage people to make their own testimonials, make their own videos, tell their own stories, which is why now, if you go on YouTube or if you go on our Facebook group, if you go whatever, you can find video after video after video, people telling their stories about why they're walking away from the Democratic Party. And the thing that touches me more than anything, and really, really touches my heart, and I think means more to me than anything in the world, is the sheer volume of testimonials of Black people, of brown people, of LGBT people, of minorities in America who are waking up and getting it. You're being used, you're being manipulated. The Democratic Party does not care about you. The liberal media does not care about you. They are using you for your votes, and they are telling you every day that you are a victim and that you can't succeed, and that the system is rigged against you, and that you live in a white supremacist society, and that white supremacists are on the rise, and that the KKK is growing, and you're in danger, and you're in danger, and you're in danger. No, you're not. You're really not. You're actually really, really not. Things are actually really, really good, and I think it's probably the best time in our history to be a minority in America. There's never been a better time to be a gay man. I can be an openly gay man in America. I can start a conservative movement. I'm supported by conservatives. No one has ever come up to me and said, I love your movement, but I can't support you because you're gay. They say, thank you so much for telling the truth. Thank you for speaking out. Thank you for shedding a light on what it really truly means to be conservative, and for ripping the roof off of this narrative of racism, bigotry, and oppression that has been synonymous for so long with the political right. People are walking away, and minorities are walking away. And it wasn't enough to just make it a Facebook group. We are now a 501c3 organization. We are now touring the country doing these different initiatives, basically, to engage specifically with communities. Now, I live in New York City. I live in Harlem. Harlem is a community that's about 67% Black. It's about 13% Hispanic. I think it's about 7% white. And so I did the first initiative in my own community, which was the Walkaway Harlem Town Hall. We created a 35-minute documentary film called, they actually got it wrong up there, I don't know how that happened, but it's called The Great Awakening, Breaking the Chains of the Democratic Party. Yeah, so you had to change it? Who made you change that? It didn't allow you to say change because it's racist. It didn't go over well. Well, the name of the movie is The Great Awakening, Breaking the Chains of the Democratic Party. And it is a movie that we made using the testimonial videos of 20 Black Americans who have walked away from the Democratic Party, and they're telling their stories as to why. They're telling their reasons for walking away from a party that they now see as divisive, as lying, as holding them back, as chaining them to their identity, when it doesn't have to be that way anymore in America. So this is about a 35-minute documentary. So I rented out a theater in Harlem. We raised the funds just through grassroots fundraising, and we're going around the country renting out theaters. We're showing this film. We're encouraging all people to come, but particularly minorities, racial minorities, to come. Hear an alternative point of view that's being told from other Black people who are telling their own stories about why they're walking away. And then we do a panel discussion afterwards with walkaway people, with conservatives. We do a Q&A so people can engage in conversation. We change voter registration at these events. And at the last event, the event in Harlem, we actually changed 7 Black Americans' votes from Democrat to Republican. And the next one's going to be in Los Angeles on May 1st, and then we're doing the LGBT town hall in Los Angeles on May 2nd, which we also did an LGBT in New York, which went amazingly after we were pounced on by a leftist mob who got our venue shut down because the liberal media got involved, called us a hate group, said we were, white supremacist, racist, blah, blah, blah. The LGBT center that was hosting our event believed this media and canceled our event, but we found another venue, and it ended up being a huge success. These events will be available on YouTube for people to watch. And in a nutshell, that's about it. I mean, between now and 2020, it's my goal to work tirelessly to open the minds and set free people who I think for so long have been brainwashed by the liberal media. They have been trapped and ensnared by a liberal ideology, which is telling them that they're victims and that they can't succeed in America and that they're being held back. And I am letting people, we don't tell people in the Walk Away campaign that they have to become Republicans. That's actually a myth that you'll read in a lot of, Huffington Post, CNN, whatever. We have people in the Walk Away campaign who are independents. We have people who are libertarians. We have people who are Republicans. Some people love Trump. Some people don't love Trump. And that's fine. I don't care. Walk Away is a journey, not a destination. I don't tell people where to go or what to think. I just tell them, take a look at what's really truly happening with the Democratic Party because they're using you. They're manipulating you. They're taking advantage of you, and they are selling you a total line of bullshit, which is going to ensure that you never, ever can succeed in this country. Whereas setting yourself free and embracing your individual identity as American and understanding that America is a unique nation that needs to be protected. It needs to be cherished and valued. It needs to have borders. And if necessary, it needs to have a wall to ensure that we know what our country is and what our culture is, who we're about, and what makes America great and what makes America special. And so what I want to do really is just go around and try to wake as many people up in this country as possible, get them to start thinking for themselves, turn off CNN, turn off Huffington Post, turn off the New York Times, turn off MSNBC, turn off Rachel Maddow, turn off all of these people because you're basically being engaging in an addictive behavior, going back day after day after day to this trough of just lies and deceit that's designed to scare you and make you feel like something is going on in this country that isn't going on. And I guess since there's going to be a Q&A, I'll kind of leave it there. I'm sure people have questions or want to call me names or something. That's cool. I have no problem with that. But I'll leave it there, and thank you all so much for hearing what I had to say.
So what we're going to do is, sure, that's exactly what we suggest. What we want to do is fill questions and have a Q&A a bit. And let me ask you to do a couple of things. Hang on for a second. Couple of instructive things. If you would, come down front here. State your name, ask your question, and again, want to remind you we want to have a discussion, a dialogue, conversation with college students and others. I'm another. So join us down here, and I understand that Brandon will field some comments, some questions for about 20, 30 minutes. Is that okay?
Sure.
Right? Don't make so I say this all the time. Y'all, but we've all been in that event where the person that's supposed to be asking the question makes a full-fledged dissertation statement. Ask the question, and ask the question as soon as succinctly as possible, so that you can actually have the dialogue. Right? All right.
That's true. That happens at every event.
Come on down here.
Melissa, where are you? I want water. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mispa. I'm a sophomore here.
Hi.
And thank you for your presentation. It was very insightful.
Thank you.
I don't really subscribe to a Democratic or Republican, but my question is you talked about how Black people and other minorities do not have certain privileges, and I'm African, obviously, and I'm also lesbian, which is kind of obvious too. So my question is my question is what privileges do Black people have, and you have certain views about sections of the queer community. So is this slightly misconstrued about your views to be able to speak for the whole community as a whole?
I got the first question. I didn't catch the second one. I'm sorry.
My second question was, you talked about your opposition to the word queer.
Yes.
And everything, but just because they're your views, does that mean that you're talking for the whole community? And because some people do like being called queer because it's more inclusive that way. So I want to know first what privileges Black people have, and second, if you're actually speaking for the whole community and not just you.
Sure. Okay. So we'll start with your first question. Well, what I said was that I think that there are privileges to being any race, and I think there's privileges to any gender or sexual orientation. If you want me to name specific things, I mean, there are affirmative action programs in this country where well-qualified Asian people or white people are not accepted into college or jobs or things like that, when lesser qualified people who happen to be black sometimes get those opportunities, and they're not really justly deserved, excuse me, that's not a word. You know, and then there are also just, I mean, those are some of the ones that I think that could be really examined in terms of, because they exist on paper, those are laws. There are so many that maybe we can't prove it because we just know it. I mean, and Jussie Smollett, I think, is another example. I guarantee you, well, first of all, shortly before Jussie Smollett, there were some white kids, as we know, wearing MAGA hats, who were actually really themselves the victims of some really bad behavior by some other people who were Native American, and I think the other ones were Africans, I believe. And people automatically assumed that they were guilty because they were white. They were white people wearing MAGA hats, therefore they're racist, they're bad people, and they were judged guilty in the court of public opinion. When Jussie Smollett claimed that he had been attacked for being black or for being gay, nobody questioned it. Well, conservatives did, because we knew immediately what was going on. We're not that stupid anymore. But liberal people didn't question it. They were like, well, of course, racist society, white people are racist. So I mean, there are many privileges. Some of them can be literally seen and read and you know, viewed because they exist legally or on paper. And then some of them are just the culture in which we exist, where if you're a black person and you claim a crime happened to you, people are going to believe you. And if you are, especially, you know, I mean, if you're claiming that it was committed by a white Republican, they're certainly going to believe you. And if you're a white person who's innocent but accused of racism, people are probably going to not give you the benefit of the doubt there either. So those are some examples of the privileges. In terms of the word queer, I actually want to throw a question back to you. How is it more inclusive? Who does it include?
Everyone, not just gay men.
Who's everyone?
Gay men, transgender people, lesbians, bisexuals, transgender, if I haven't said that already. Literally anyone who's not straight and white.
Exactly. That's why I object to the word.
So just because you're gay and white, that means you have a privilege calling everybody out.
It was a word that was designed intentionally to exclude a class of people that are consistently excluded with the purpose of demonizing and villainizing these people, and that are straight white people.
Thank you for clarifying.
You're welcome. Hi.
Hello, my name is Emilio. I'm a freshman. So you described yourself as a liberal back in 2016 when you were with Clinton. So I'm assuming you had a majority of liberal opinions on other issues like abortion and healthcare and immigration.
Yes.
And you describe yourself as conservative now, so I'm assuming those opinions have shifted. So my question is, since there are quite a few Democrats that almost agree with a lot of what you said, so they oppose CNN and MSNBC, and they oppose identity politics and political correctness, yet are still liberal because of their views on healthcare and immigration and other things like that. So how did you do such a radical 180 shift on every other single important political issue just because of identity politics? Because it doesn't seem like enough.
Yeah, that seems like that's actually a really great question. But the structure of the question is a little bit faulty. That's not exactly how it happened. Excuse me. What happened was, as I was describing, you know, getting into bed at night and watching the conservative point of view, listening to these debates, two things happened. One, in certain circumstances, I began to change. Thank you. In certain circumstances, I began to change my mind about certain issues based off of the discussions and the debates that I was listening to, and in other circumstances, I realized that's how I felt all along. I mean, for instance, I don't think my attitude about abortion has actually changed whatsoever. I've always thought that if a woman is raped, or if she's the victim of incest or some sort of violent attack or something like that, I believe forcing her to carry a baby is inhumane. To me, it's unconscionable. I cannot fathom telling somebody who's raped in a back alley by some disgusting person, nope, you have to carry that baby for 9 months and you have to change your whole life. And for me, absolutely not. However, I've never thought that it should be used flippantly as a form of birth control. And certainly now, as we see Democrats are in certain states, and I think really widespread, are pushing this further and further to the point of like, you're dilating on your way to the hospital, and as long as the head's not popping out, you can still kill it. I think it's getting to be a bit much for just about everybody. I mean, I know many Democrats were like, holy shit, what's going on? I think this has gone a little too far. Now, what ends up happening when you're a liberal is that there's sort of an allyship that happens amongst, it's the whole intersectionality thing, I think, to a certain degree. It's like, well, I'm a gay man, and you're a woman who supports marriage equality, and since you support me, well, of course, I'm going to support your right to choose. And like, I mean, I think this is about the level of depth of thought that many minorities, and nobody get triggered because I'm not saying everybody, but I'm saying I think a lot of people put about that much thought into their political opinions. It's like, well, we're all minorities, so let's all just support each other's causes and stuff. And I came to realize a lot of these causes I just never supported in the first place. And just because I'm a conservative, I mean, I didn't leave groupthink just so I could walk into more groupthink. That's what I think liberalism is. I think it's tribalism. I think it's groupthink. But I form my own opinions, and I change my own mind as I want to, and as I educate myself, and as I take in more information, and I decide what's the right thing for me. Conservatives sometimes get angry at me because there are certain conservatives who say abortion is wrong, period. You can never, there is no justifiable reason to ever have an abortion. I don't think that that's true. And I'm still a conservative, and I'm still a Republican.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you very much for coming to speak to us.
Thank you.
So I actually have a question about your opinion on Oberfeld versus Hodges, the Supreme Court case that passed marriage equality.
Okay.
So the dissenting justices in that case talk about how, even though they personally think that, they have no objection to marriage equality, they take umbrage with the fact that 5 lawyers are kind of circumventing the legislature to pass this very to implement this very large societal social change.
Right.
What do you think about that?
What do I think about the Supreme Court making the decision, essentially?
First being passed in the legislature by referendum.
Well, I believe what the real argument is for people who dissent is that, is there a constitutional right or a basis to getting married? And wow, that's such a good question. I actually have put a little thought into it, but not enough. I mean, obviously I'm biased. I believe that there is no logical reason to prevent 2 consenting adults from being able to go to City Hall and sign a contract stating that they're going to spend the rest of their lives together in a marital relationship. I mean, it doesn't mean that it's religiously ordained or blessed. It's literally just the same civil marriage contract that other people get to sign. I guess I believe that one could interpret the pursuit of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness as the ability to have the same rights and the same ability to marry other people as anyone else. And I think, although I haven't read the entire dissertation, but I think that is sort of the judgment that the judges made who approved marriage equality. And I'm sorry, the short answer to your question is I don't have an issue with the fact that the Supreme Court made the decision, and and again, I think it's kind of stupid that conservatives were pushing back on it for any reason. I just don't think there's any reasonable, justifiable reason. You're welcome.
I'm short, so I'm gonna have to. Hi, my name is Lou.
Hi, Lou.
Hi. So I'm an American Studies major, so Black, queer, feminist scholar, and I always like to kind of spice it up and address misinformation. And so I had 2 questions, and the first one was, you had made a comment about Black trans lesbians or something, and then you proceeded to talk about civil rights queer rights activists in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
And your comment seemed a little dismissive of identities of being a Black trans lesbian. And I just was curious to know if you knew that the Stonewall movement, which is often considered as the hallmark and the first step in the gay liberation movement in the United States, was actually started by
Marsha P. Johnson.
Yeah. So I'm glad you know. Just wanted to know.
Thank you.
And also, I was wondering if you you made a comment about the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Are you aware that they shift political platforms?
That's
in
not
the
true.
60s?
That's not true. That's been debunked 101,000 times. And I'll be honest with you, I probably couldn't give you the most articulate reason why, but you can certainly find it very easily. What's that?
I can tell you why if you want.
Why they didn't change?
Why it's accurate that they did change.
Well,
if you would like to know. If not, it's totally fine. It's up to you.
Sure, I'd love to hear what you have to say. But the fact of the matter is that it has to do with the Dixiecrats and the fact that there was literally one person who shifted their position. It's a complete myth. It's been debunked. Watch Dinesh D'Souza's explanation of this, or 1,000 other explanations of this. This is a myth you've been indoctrinated with. We all learned this. I believed it too. I was just like you. I believe that it's not true. But go ahead, tell me.
Not very alike, but
not really what?
Nothing. So basically what happened is, dating back from Reconstruction, the Republican Party was the party of Lincoln, seen as a very progressive party of emancipation, impeached President Andrew Johnson. Y'all could fact check me on that because I'm not sure, because he was a proven racist. And basically the Ku Klux Klan started in reaction to free emancipated blacks seeking political agency and taking office. And so the Republican Party, the Ku Klux Klan started the first wave was begun to target Republicans, especially free emancipated black, formerly enslaved people. And so their first acts were motivated by the Republican Party, the party of Lincoln. Come the 50s and 60s with presidents like Lyndon B. Johnson, who ran as Southern Democrats, but had progressive policies and platforms. And that's where you start to see a shift in politics and platform and who is voting for what party. And because of the progressive platform of Democratic Southern presidents like Kennedy and like Johnson, you see more progressive people start to vote Democrat. And so when this happens and legislation is passed, more people of color start to vote for the Democratic Party. And so that is where we see the shift in platform occur, where Republicanism started, well, not Republicanism because that's something else in academia, but the Republican Party started having a more conservative platform after that. And so it's in the policy, it's in the legislation, and it's in, you can see the trends in voting and the trends in which presidents started passing which legislation. So that's just, it's in the books. Sorry, I can't make it up.
Well, you did just make it up. You didn't make it up. Someone else made it up, and you believed it. But
I'm 20 years old.
I get it, but I think what I would highly recommend that you do is I would watch the entire film by Dinesh D'Souza called Hillary's America. It's got a subtitle too. The Secret Truth of the Democratic Party, I think, is what it's called. It will literally tear to shreds everything that you just said, using facts and information about what actually happened and the great myth of the party switch. I believed it too, hon. I really did. I mean,
thank you.
And I apologize that, you know what, you checked me, and you checked me really good, because what I need to do in the future is make sure that I'm prepared to articulate exactly why that point is right, and today I'm not. But check out that movie, because it'll do a much better job than I can.
Great. Thank you so much for this platform, y'all. Peace and love.
Peace and love to you.
I look older than most of you because I am. I'm an alum, and so I'm the opposite. So I'm a white, married, straight lady with 3 kids. But I'm also very involved with LGBTQ movements, setting up pride festivals. You should all go to the Middletown Pride Festival on June 15th. It's our first. So everybody sort of assumes right off the bat, I can't reach this, that I'm Democrat. I'm not. Surprisingly, I'm also not conservative. So my question for you is, how do you overcome the juxtaposition? So if I grant that it's media bias and a lot of the falsehoods is being portrayed by the liberal media, I'm going to grant the other side and say then that sort of leaves this open area on the right for a lot of racists, a lot of bigots, a lot of homophobic people to go that way. How do you counter that, or how do you overcome that juxtaposition that you have one party that is completely sort of one identity, and you have another that almost in juxtaposition is becoming a safe haven for the opposite view and more hateful views? So how do you overcome that when you're having these conversations? Because I think there's people like me that are, I don't identify with either party because I think they're both full of poop most of the time.
Okay.
So how do you overcome that when you try to break people free
Well, first of all, I do not believe that there is a rising trend of.
Granted, I'll grant you no rising trend. So let's say.
But they say that all the time.
Right. So let's say it's stable, though. Are those people? That's a stable level of racism and homophobia.
I don't think it is stable. I
think
just
it's
don't.
shrinking.
Absolutely.
Okay, then even if
Yeah,
it's
the homophobia I experience today is it's a whole different world than it was 5 years ago.
Granted. But if the perception exists on the opposite, how do you overcome that as you're trying to sort of free people to think openly and independently?
Got it. That's a great question. So one of the things that I've done with this campaign too is not only encourage people who are walking away to make their walkaway testimonials, but we have the people who have always been on the right, or at least have been on the right for a long time, and we call them the walk withs, and we encourage people who walk with to also make their testimonials. The reason I actually think that these testimonials are probably more important than even the walkaway testimonials, which are very important because they show people that they're not alone when they want to walk away. But the walk with it testimonials are so important because they're designed in such a way to reclaim the narrative of what truly means to be a conservative or a Republican or however you identify on the right, which has been hijacked so long by the liberal media. There are thousands of these videos now, and tens of thousands of written testimonials that we've created from people all across the country. And by the way, these are not all white people. I mean, black.
I totally want you to.
No, but I'm saying that black conservatives have existed always, you know what I mean? And they get treated like they don't exist, but they do exist. And gay conservatives have existed for a long time. They're, you know, the dirty secret that the liberal media doesn't want you to know about, but they're there, they exist, and they're real. And so I encourage people to make these testimonials and say, look, these are the reasons why I'm actually a conservative, and none of these reasons are based in racism, hatred, bigotry, or homophobia, or any of these things. They're based on the ways that I interpret the Constitution, or the fact that I think that, you know, we're moving more towards socialism, and that's scary because I think we need to remain a capitalist nation, which allows people to succeed. I'm scared about our national security. I mean, it's really just opportunities for people to tell the truth and to also extend a hand and say, look, there's a seat at the table for people on the right, whether you're, we don't care about nobody cares. This is the thing, like, people don't really care if you're gay. They don't really care if you're, maybe like a few people do, but it's such, I feel like the media finds those few people and tries to tell you that there's this growing trend, there's this rising trend, there's this thing, and it's just simply is not true. I mean, in the 1920s, there were, I think, something like 128 million people in America, and 4 million people in the KKK. 4 million out of like 128 million citizens. There's now like 360 million people in America, and 6,000 people in the KKK. 6,000. It's like 0.0001% of the population is in the KKK. It's insignificant. It doesn't even matter. But the media will run when there's, you know, 50 KKK people that have assembled and say, oh my God, look what Trump has done, look what's happening, look what's happening. Nothing is happening. This isn't real. So, I mean, it's really, I think it's important for common sense, the silent majority, to become unsilent, to tell their stories, to speak up, and to make sure that people know that conservatism isn't just for white people. As a matter of fact, we want people of color. We want LGBT people. We want everyone to have the same opportunities, and I think that you can only have that if you shake off the tribal identity, the group think, and you just embrace yourself as an individual. This doesn't mean you can't acknowledge that you're black. Of course you're black. I'm gay. I say every day that I'm gay. But I'm not a victim because I'm gay. And you might feel like you're a victim because that's what you've been trained to believe based off of the color of your skin or your sexual orientation, but you're actually not. And it's time to let that go and embrace your power. And I think that conservatives just need to speak up more. And more people need to do what I'm doing.
I think you're talking about the next generation of conservative as it's sort of transitioning.
We don't have to wait that long. I mean, we have a president in office right now who is shattering everything, and in a good way. I think. I think that. And one really great thing, I think, of many great things that have happened because of this president is I think that there's been a clear line of delineation between the old guard of Republicans and where the Republican Party, I believe, is headed. And it's so funny, it's so ironic, because I actually think that because of Donald Trump, the Republican Party is becoming more inclusive, younger, more diverse, less racist, less homophobic, and it's really those never-Trumpers that we just need to get rid of because they represent an America that I think has changed and moved on, and I do believe the Republican Party is actually diverse and inclusive.
Thank you, good answer.
Thank you.
Can I tell everybody to come to that event on June 15th again?
Say it again.
Yeah, okay, so Middletown, Connecticut, we're not far away. It's It's our first LGBTQ festival. Everybody come. There's going to be a big party. There's a beer garden for those of you who are of age. Thank you.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Good. Thank you. Thank you very much for speaking to us.
Sure.
Honestly. And my name is Nelson, freshman at the school. I'm a staunch Republican, just so you know. And so my question, I guess, here is twofold. One pertains to your ideological standpoint, and the other one pertains to a more anecdotal standpoint. First of all, my question is, and this is a question I ask myself all the time. And as a conservative yourself, right? Am I correct? Yes. As a conservative, how do you reconcile with a lot of what I regard as the hypocrisies inside the Republican Party, such as what I always perceive as Republican Party is a party which advocates for limited federal power, minimal level of federal intervention on state affairs, and individual rights should triumph state power. However, we see a lot of hypocrisy on these circumstances, such as the war on drugs and the controlled substances, as well as the war on drugs and controlled substances. That's what I can think on top of my head. Whereas the Republican Party would advocate for a more tighter and stricter federal level control, a more involvement of the federal government. Whereas on some other issues, we have, such as gun control, we have the Republican Party advocating for a more of a state approach. So in my mind, I think when I think of the Republican Party and limited federal government, I think about that on a whole national scale. So if they wish to limit the federal involvement in state politics, then everything should be limited, not limiting it on some aspects and growing it on some other aspects. So my first question pertains to this issue. How do you, I guess, reconcile with the hypocrisies, what I call as hypocrisies, in the Republican Party? And secondly, my question pertains to a more anecdotal standpoint.
Okay.
It is, just like you said, minorities in the United States has a very particular, I guess, narrative about especially racial minorities.
Right.
And they think, the Democratic Party is saving them from certain social chains, and those chains need to be broken by, breaking the certain privileges. So my question
Breaking
is,
the hold of the Democratic Party. Sorry, go ahead.
I'll say change, whatever. Come at me. Anyway, so my question really pertains to, as someone who is also a racial minority, I suppose, what can we do to help the cause? What can we do to break the stereotypes, to break the chains? I'll say chains. To break the chains and to raise people's awareness about the staunch level of hypocrisy and untruths that lies within the liberal narrative right now. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. I think I'm going to start with your second question first because the answer is pretty simple. I think we do it by doing what you're doing right now and what I'm doing right now, that we show the world that we exist, that we show the world that just because based off of your race or my sexual orientation, we are not enslaved into a way of thinking or trapped in a way of thinking that or a way of voting or a political party, or that we have to have our choices, our decisions made based off of our minority identity status, and you're Asian. What are you? Where in Asia are you from?
Where in Asia am I from?
Well, your people, your background. What's your background?
Oh, China.
China.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so interesting because Asians get lumped into the category of people of color, which again, that's another word like queer that is designed literally to exclude everyone except for white people. And it's funny because you're a part of the group that is considered to be oppressed and held down in America as a person of color, but I'm sure you know the statistics about Asian people, right?
I don't feel oppressed. Asian people have the lowest level of crime rate, highest level of college attendance.
You're making more money than everybody else.
That's
Yeah.
true.
Getting the best grades. Yeah, no, you guys are doing great. Everyone should hate you guys. I don't know why everybody hates white people so much. No, but I think that what we do is we just continue to show people that we exist, and and you know, it's kind of a crappy time that we're in right now, where people like you or people like me may get a lot of heat or a lot of flack for breaking away from the herd, but I admire you greatly, because you obviously are a person who has the courage of your own convictions, and you have made your own decisions, and you seem like you're very informed, and you're an autonomous thinker, and I think that that's really admirable, and that's really cool. And I think the more that people like you speak out, the more that we can show that it's okay to be a minority and to make up your own mind and to do your own thing. And okay, and then in terms of your first question about limited government, that's a great question. You know, as somebody who was literally just a liberal like a year and a half ago or something, there's a lot of things I need to rethink, I think, and a lot of things that I still process, or that I have to kind of debate more to try to understand specifically how I feel about it. I don't think I've ever been presented with a question before, is war on drugs or government interference in a drug problem more government? I mean, that's a really, really interesting question. My instinct, and I don't know if it's still like remnants of, you know, liberal thinking, is that if we live in a society together and dangerous elements and components enter our society, like weaponry or drugs or things like that, would your suggestion be, if you do drugs, you do drugs, if you die, you die, and the government shouldn't get involved? And I mean, I don't mean that callously, but I'm asking.
Well, no, but however, from a constitutional standpoint, and considering the federalism, the principle of federalism our country has lived by, criminal law and criminal codes and law enforcement has always been a matter of state concern. You know, states have their individual penal codes, and states enforce criminal laws. So that's why I said I was trying to reconcile with the hypocrisy in the Republican government. On one side, we say limited government and a small federal government, limited interference of state affairs.
Right.
But on the other hand, we say we need federal funding and power devoted to all these war on crimes, war on drugs, you know, all these things, and to enforce abortion across the nation, no abortion across the nation. You know, rhetoric such as this. You know, I don't know if I made sense or not.
No, you make perfect sense. I guess what I'm saying is that I would have to, I think, spend a little bit of time thinking through the proposition that you just gave me, because my instinct tells me, and again, I mean, it may be remnants of liberalism, but my instinct tells me if there are dangers in our society, like drugs that have come in, and I mean, we see it all the time. I mean, the opioid crisis has affected my own family. I have a lot of people in my family who have lost their careers and everything in their lives because of opioid addiction. I myself, I didn't do opiates, but I'm a former cocaine addict and an alcoholic. I've been sober for almost 5 years, so I was able to escape that trap. But I don't know, I mean, I guess to me, I like the idea that we have a government that wants to protect us from these things so that we can thrive as Americans. But yeah, I mean, you've given me something to think about, and I guess I would want some time to think that through. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Hi again.
I'm back. Miss Bud, if you forgot, Black queer woman.
Yes.
I have a question in terms of, there's a bit, kind of like, so in history class, we learned that like white people went like out of their ways to go to like a different country, steal black people, and then take it to America to work with the slaves. So like now the dynamic of race relations in America has shifted because slavery is not a thing anymore, but there's a reminiscence of it, very much so, in society. But are like white conservatives now the victims of like how slavery ended, and now white conservatives are being targeted, as you said, like you were targeted on social media.
Yeah.
And like are they now the victims of such race relations in America?
Well, I mean, victim is not really, that's not really, I guess, language that I...
Yeah, what would you call it?
Well, I mean, it would depend on, is your question specifically about race? Or is it, because I do think that conservatives are targeted now for violence and intimidation, and I'm not comparing it to slavery. I mean, that's not what I'm saying. And in fact, there was a conservative recently, a very prominent conservative, who said being gay today is just like being gay in the 80s. And I was like, no, it's not. It really isn't. I think we have a lot of problems right now. But anyway, I want to be very clear about what your question is. You're talking about race?
So like, do people of color misconstrue the actual facts they're actually victims in society, as opposed to white conservatives who also face some backlash for their views.
Do black people misconstrue?
So are black people victims, or or are they just making it up?
Well, I don't think that you're a victim just because you're black.
I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about black people.
No, I wasn't either. Yeah, no, I know. I don't think that anybody's a victim just because of the color of their skin. And I think that if we look at the certain maybe conditions of certain communities and where they are, I mean, I think it's certainly true that, you know, economically and in terms of crime and things like that, the black community is struggling, I think, more than other racial groups are struggling in some of those areas. But I think it could be strongly argued that Democratic Party policies are largely responsible for a lot of those reasons, and that I don't think that they are the saviors of this racial group. I think that they are actually, they've done a lot of destruction to this racial group. Are you a victim? Are they making it up? No, I mean, I guess my point is that if you're a single mother on welfare who's black, living in Harlem, and you have 2 or 3 kids that and you're living on, you know, in a low-income housing, on government assistance, you probably feel like you're a victim. You probably feel like you got a really raw deal in a country that seems to favor people of other races. But there's a woman named Angela King, and she's Martin Luther King Jr.'s godniece, and she's actually joined me on this walkway mission. She was in my Harlem Town Hall panel, and she's going to be in my next panel too in Los Angeles. And she has, I think, the most amazing story, and she said something, this Harlem Town Hall panel was only a month ago, and she said something that just resonated with me, and it hasn't left me alone. She said she was one of these people. She got pregnant as a teenager. She was on government assistance. She committed a crime. She went to prison. She said, I didn't go to prison because I was black. I went to prison because I committed a crime and I got caught. And I deserved to go to prison. That's what happened. But she said when she got out of prison, that I believe that she said because she was a convicted felon that she was no longer able to qualify for certain government assistance programs, which I didn't know until she said that. I didn't even know that that was a thing. But she said at the time she felt really cheated, and she was just like, you know, that's all I was used to. I was used to collecting, you know, my welfare check, and I was used to living on the government assistance, and that was my lifestyle. And she said when I got out of prison and I was no longer able to have to receive that assistance as I was before, she's like, I felt devastated and I felt cheated and I didn't know what to do. But she said, you know what ended up happening? It forced me to step into my greatness. Because she said, I had no choice. I wasn't able to receive that sort of dependence anymore, or I wasn't able to be dependent like that anymore. And now she's a successful businesswoman. I mean, she actually had to go out, she had to get to work, and she had to change her life. She was forced to change her life. And now she has this life that's beyond her wildest dreams, and she's like, you know, none of this would have happened to me if I had stayed in that victim state of mind and dependent on government assistance, because this is what the Democrats want me to be. And and Democrats incentivize single motherhood. I mean, they incentivize being a person who literally, they incentivize not working, they incentivize not getting married, they incentivize, it's terrible. I mean, that's why the single motherhood rate in the black community is at between 73 and 74%. It's insane. There were more black babies aborted in New York City than born alive. That's a true thing, you can look that up. Republicans are not pushing for abortion, and Republicans are not pushing for government assistance. Republicans are pushing for people to embrace their power. They're not doing a good job at communicating with minority groups. They're not doing a good job at telling people, we want you here, we want you to have the same experience in America, or the same ability to pull yourself out of poverty, to pull yourself up, you know. But no, I don't think that anybody's a victim simply because of the color of their skin, but I certainly understand why they might feel like they are, and I think that if constantly receiving that message by the liberal media and by the Democratic Party is keeping people suspended in a state of despair.
Thank you, but also quick question, why is the cops and security here?
The what?
The security, why are they here?
They're not mine.
I I can
Thank you.
probably answer that to a degree. There was, you know, we didn't know. It went out on social media. It went out on Twitter. Wasn't the, what's your concern? I guess I would ask.
I was just wondering because I've never seen them at any other event, so I was kind of wondering if something else happening.
Oh, just.
Thank you again.
You're welcome. I mean, just to clear up if there is any possible speculation, we did just do these town hall events in New York City, and as I told you, the LGBT event got closed down by a leftist mob who came out with a petition saying that we were a hate group and white supremacists, etc. The venue that we found after our first event was canceled was tagged by Antifa. They put stickers all over the door and promised that they were going to come and create a lot of trouble. And then protesters did show up to that event. And I imagine somebody probably read about that in the press and wanted to make sure everybody was safe. That's what I would imagine.
Yeah, I do want to say one thing, and I'm not a spokesperson for this. The concern was not about the Trinity community at all. Not one bit. I think there was a concern that we didn't know about outsiders might.
Like Hartford locals?
Is it a public?
Or like which community?
Like which community?
Yeah, I feel like we're just kind of curious about
The security.
like just
not
wondering.
about the Trinity campus community at all. It had nothing to do with the Trinity campus community. I think it had to do with the possibility of what we don't know outside of Trinity.
Oh,
just
it's like the
nobody
Hartford
can-
locals and everything?
It
It's
had
like what he's
nothing.
talking about with having the.
Do you feel like there's a racial component to it?
I was gonna suggest that. I was just.
It seems, yeah, but it seems like, I'm just being honest, everyone's thinking that's what you're thinking. We are, that's what we're all thinking. So let's just talk about it.
I can talk in a I'm 20 years old.
I'm an alum. I graduated in '91. If you want to talk about if there's some racial issue you want to talk
No,
about,
I
please.
think we're. Okay. It wasn't racial. I'm just asking because.
Yeah, no worries.
They said like it wasn't a part of Trinity campus. What other community is there? So I was asking. Just because they're black, mostly black, doesn't mean I'm thinking about black people. I'm just thinking just in general. Like I was wondering if there's a serious concern like that we should all be concerned about. But if there isn't, then that's fine. That's just my question. I was trying to make a racial at all.
Okay, well, I apologize if I, misidentified your motivation. To me, having security on hand, it can never be a bad thing. I mean, it's let's keep people safe, right? Like, why would we ever question that? Yeah.
Hi, yeah, I'm Naitara. I'm a freshman here.
Yeah.
So I found what you had said about every group having certain privileges pretty interesting.
Yes.
And I won't contend with you on that, but I mean.
You guys make me nervous when you come up here with your phones, because I know you're like, you got your statistics ready. It's like, okay, go ahead. I don't have my phone. Go ahead.
But statistically, we might. I mean, no, I don't have statistics. Don't worry. It's like
No, it's fine. It's fine.
So we might see, for example, that a particular group is marginalized in particular circumstances. So whether it's crime or another aspect. And so extending from that, I feel like the existence of privileges for each group, to me, is also accompanied by the sense that every privilege is not made equal.
Okay.
In a sense, so I was wondering what you would say about like a hierarchy of privileges, and I think like to me it's possible. Like I can really see why playing identity politics is bad for society in general, but I think it's also possible to acknowledge that there, like to me, I'm curious about whether or not you think there is actually a hierarchy of privileges that particular groups might have. But we can acknowledge that that hierarchy exists, and therefore that particular groups might be, in some cases, more or less victimized, but we don't have to operate under an individual understanding of, oh, I'm a victim, I can rise above that, but we can acknowledge that particular individuals might be disadvantaged by whatever race, sexuality, whatever form of stratification.
Okay, it's a wonderful question. I truly believe that each individual's experience is different, and therefore acknowledging a hierarchy of privilege takes us exactly back to where we are right now, where we're generalizing and saying that just based off of the color of your skin or your sexual orientation or your gender, that you are having a certain experience that many people probably do not have. Now, I'm about to say something that's probably going to upset a lot of people, but it's how I truly feel, and I think it's accurate. I think that there are two forms of privilege in this country that far exceed any other type of privilege. Now, I want to be clear again. I still think that there are privileges to being white, just like I think there are privileges to being black or Hispanic or whatever. I think there are privileges to being gay or straight. I think the two greatest forms of privilege in this country are wealth privilege and attractiveness. And that's the honest to God truth. And by that I mean, Halle Berry does not have the same experience as the single mother in Harlem who's black and living on welfare. Halle Berry does not have people attacking her because of her race. It's certainly not in the same way that somebody else does, okay? A gay model who's 6'4" and gorgeous and has a British accent does not experience homophobia the same way as that guy who's like, oh my God, you know, who's like coming into the room and just being like, yeah, Thwart Queen, but it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing. And so, and wealth is another thing too. I mean, look at Jussie Smollett. I'm sorry, how many times can that's why I love that this thing happened with Jussie Smollett. I love it. It so shines so much light on all this BS and all this total hypocrisy. It's a wealthy, successful gay black man who had to actually pay other people to attack him, to try to perpetuate a narrative that isn't true for him at all. If it were true for him, he could have simply just used a real example that happens on a common basis. I mean, it must happen to him all the time, obviously. It doesn't. He had to pay people to do it. Because as a wealthy and successful person who is attractive and is in Hollywood, he doesn't actually legitimately experience those things that he claimed to experience. He did that so he could get even more money and become even more privileged. And so no, I don't believe in a hierarchy of privilege that we should acknowledge and accept as a fact in society, because there are many variables that need to be considered. And I think that if you are wealthy and attractive and black, you're not experiencing racism the same way other people are, and possibly not at all.
Yeah, so so essentially it's kind of like an individualistic understanding of the world, right? Like you understand people as individuals, not as identities.
Yeah, I mean, when I go through life and I look at what's happening in the world, I see the way that if you present yourself as a human being, no matter what color your skin is, as kind, as helpful, as educated, as well-dressed, as somebody who wants to be a part of the collective whole of let's do something positive together as a society, I don't see people like that getting rejected. The people I see getting rejected are the people who present themselves with a nasty attitude, who present themselves as selfish and, you know, everybody owes me something, and who are screaming and swearing in public and have complete disrespect for other people. And then, when people get upset with that they behave that way, they're saying y'all are racist. Well, if we're racist, why don't we have a problem with all the other people who look just like you, but are actually nice and are actually, you know, behaving in a way that's civilized and conducive to our society as a whole? That's what I think.
I'm so sorry, just a last follow-up
Yeah.
question. So I guess if we are going to understand people as individuals, which I definitely agree with you on, I feel like I think that the reason why we have things like statistics, right? We say 20%, this is like 20% more likely, or it's more likely that this is going to happen to this group, and things like that.
Sure.
Those are ways that, I mean, maybe it's unfortunate, but those are ways in which society as a whole, and I think societies all over the world have come to make it possible to interpret the world. So maybe it's inevitable in a sense that that we see people as groups, because I mean statistics aren't going to betray like an individual's experience, right?
Right.
But they betray what a group may experience as a whole. So it may be unfortunate that we use statistics to say, okay, this group is 20% more likely to experience this. So when I see someone of that group, maybe I say, okay, it's more likely that happened, and maybe I make that assumption. But I was wondering if then I might be entirely wrong if you think that's just inevitable from that standpoint.
First of all, I want to say I like you very much. I mean, you just like you'd really come across to me as somebody who's truly inquisitive and wants to understand. You come across as incredibly big-hearted, which I think is very admirable. I don't have a lot of love for statistics anymore these days. I mean, unless there are things that can really tangibly be proven, because a lot of the statistics that we hear thrown around these days are, hate crimes have increased by 19%, and we see the way that statistics are skewed to create a narrative. I always say that, when progressives and liberals are involved in using statistics, what they do is they look at the conclusion and then they work backwards. And when they work backwards, what they typically do is try to find deficiencies within other people's character, that there's something wrong with someone. They look and they see, when we combine all of the jobs in America and see what everyone's making, look at this. Men seem to be making more money than women. White people seem to be making more money than black people. Well, obviously that means we live in a sexist, racist society. But they don't include variables like to what degree are certain groups graduating from high schools, to what degree are certain groups graduating from college, what choices are women making when they go into the workforce? Are they choosing to leave the workforce to have children? Are they choosing to take jobs that typically pay lower incomes? I mean, statistics can be skewed or misused to try to perpetuate a narrative, just like the media does. And if you're a person who wants to assign a certain motivation to, whether it be political or whatever, to other people, or to say, listen, my way is the right way and everyone else is racist or bigot or somehow morally deficient, you can skew those statistics in a way that supports that point of view. And that's why I don't have, listen, if you're saying to me, well, 20% more of this race of people experience this, says who? Says who? I mean, I know so many gay people who are like, I've literally never experienced homophobia my whole life. And that's amazing to me. I don't understand. Like, I grew up in a tiny little town in Nebraska. I experienced a ton. I mean, violence, extreme violence. But this person's not lying. They literally don't understand. They're just like, I've never even been called a fag. I've never, my parents, from the moment I was gay, they embraced it, whatever. We don't know. I mean, you don't know. And I think another danger of it is that you're telling people like that who haven't experienced those things that they should feel like they have, or that any negative thing that happens in your life is probably because of that. And then that becomes a way of viewing the world for a lot of people that just isn't true. I mean, it simply isn't true. I mean, I've literally witnessed with my own eyes before, being in a restaurant or being in a Starbucks, when a white person walked in and used the bathroom, and the person's like, are you making a purchase? And they said, no. And they're like, then you can't use the bathroom. Okay. And then 2 seconds later, a black person comes in and gets told no, and they're like, you guys are racist. No, that's the policy for everybody. You just think that because you've been conditioned to believe that every bad thing that happens to you happens because of the color of your skin. And I think we need to get away from that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Got me all heated up.
This is a little low. My name is Jederica, freshman, autonomous thinker. I'm really thankful for you to actually come. I'm very excited. And thank you for the Trinity College Republicans for bringing you.
Thank you.
I really want to really talk about, something's funny obviously, but I really want to talk about how affirmative action, I find that very interesting in the way you talked about it. Because, well, in terms of the data and the actual studies that are found, in terms of talking about it, admissions officers don't accept people of color, or let's just, in terms of just, let's use one race, black people. They don't accept black people just on the basis of them being black. It's almost when that rhetoric is used, that kind of shapes the kind of thinking for people here, especially when students inflict that same type of ideology to other black students.
Yeah.
So let me make a fictitious example. Let's say we have a club on campus, and they decide.
I'm sorry, have a what?
A club on campus.
Oh, okay.
And they have little TED Talk things, and after a little panel, one of the people on the panel is told, oh, the only reason you go here is because of affirmative action. Told to a person of color, right?
Right.
That sentiment for someone that earned their way here, probably has the grades, has the capabilities, has all the talent to be at an institution like Trinity. Why would that take away from that person's ability when that person's telling them, oh, the only reason you are here is because of your race? That kind of denotes the whole process of them actually applying to college. And I feel like that's a sentiment held in this fictitious world, totally not at Trinity, not at all. And I'm not someone that really affiliates with any party. I kind of agree that the Democratic Party does co-opt gay rights and black rights and all these rights to promote this agenda that they're the most, they're the best human beings ever.
Right.
I totally see how that makes sense. for me, it's really hard because being a sociology major, the last speaker was talking about like individualism and micro and macro. And, you know, a lot of your examples, and I mean, maybe that's just because that's what comes to the top of your head because, you know, that's the things you experience, but it just seems very individual one-on-one interactions. And for me, I care more about, let me not use the word system, but how a group of people are being affected by another group of people. So, like, I'm from New York City, I'm from Brooklyn, so we could talk about this. So, racist redlining, right? Redlining in general. Basically, neighborhoods in New York City were split up by realtors to basically make a good neighborhood and a bad neighborhood. So what ended up happening was, basically, there are neighborhoods, as you know, in New York City, you can walk straight and you'll end up in white neighborhood, black neighborhood, basically a bunch of neighborhoods just around that. But in terms of how the schooling and the education system are in those bad neighborhoods, they're majority black, they're majority underfunded, they're majority that lack resources. In terms of even specialized high schools, I'm pretty sure you're aware of, those literally accepted 6 black students out of 985 spots. Like, not saying that the system itself is racist, one could say it is racist, I'm not saying it's racist, but maybe it is racist. But maybe that possibly, when you look at a system, how can you refute, this is the question, sorry, but when you look at a system, how can you possibly refute the idea that there are, sure, certain privileges with everything, but when it comes down to race, it's just different than just being like a guy or a girl in the sense that girls face a different set of oppressions than men and all of this. But in terms of race, it's a whole different monster because, again, race is a social construction. It doesn't exist, but we give it the power to exist because of the social ideologies that we have created around ourselves. So, my question is, how can you refute the system of whiteness?
Oh, how can I refute the system of whiteness?
Yes.
Can you tell me what it is before I can refute it?
Very much so.
Yeah, what is the system of whiteness?
So the system of whiteness, basically, again, I don't want to make people think that I'm attacking white people. That is not at all what I'm saying.
Okay.
But when you are white and you play into certain ideologies in terms of, you know, the affirmative action story I made up totally, you know, you basically institute a whole people on campus to feel that they don't belong here off of the basis of color. And I don't necessarily see how someone can have a great awakening if they're told by people in this group that they aren't necessarily, you know, affirmative action favors people who are less qualified for them to come here. So I just want to know about that.
Well, that's one of the, what I think is one of the pitfalls, another one of the pitfalls of affirmative action, because I think that very qualified black people or minorities of whatever kind end up getting stigmatized and false assumptions end up getting made. I mean, it creates a question mark, I think, for some people. I would hate it. I would hate it. I mean, if there was a system of affirmative action for gay people in college, I would never think that anyone believed that I actually earned my way into that school. I would question, because I would know people were thinking that. I mean, that's human nature. Of course people are going to think that. They're going to be like, did you really have the grades? Did you really get in here? I mean, I'm sorry, you can't fault people for thinking that because that's what the system is. I mean, that's how it's designed. And it's, and listen, it works. It's more than just a black and white issue too. I mean, there are articles that just came out recently about Harvard, about how did you read about how the test scores for Asians have to be much higher than everyone. Asians have to achieve a college entrance test score much higher than any other race, and they literally broke it down. For the black community, it was the lowest. For white people, somewhere in the middle, and for Asians, it was much higher. How isn't that? That's a system of. How's that a system of whiteness?
So
that sounds like a system of blackness.
So very interesting. So in terms of that, I find it very interesting. Again, the redlining and like the underfunded schools. So I come from an underfunded school. I come from a defunct school in New York City. Basically, what that means for people who aren't from New York, basically a school was cut in 6 because it was just not working. Bloomberg did it, and there's 6 schools in my high school, right? It's a 99% black school. Out of all the students, I was one of 3 that went to a private school. And one would argue I came here because of affirmative action, because I got a posse scholarship. So I'm here on scholarship, and I'm here based on merit, and I'm here based on my abilities, but, 3.9 GPA, technically, whatever. But in terms of everything, right, when we see that schools are underfunded, aren't helping these students who aren't getting the resources, how do we expect them to get stellar grades when the same students, let's say in New York City, who are getting into these amazing schools like, Stuyvesant and Brooklyn Science and all of these amazing schools, they aren't getting the same opportunities because they aren't given the same type of schooling. So it isn't about equality, it's about equity. In my opinion, sorry.
Understood, but don't you think that comes down to money?
Absolutely.
It's not a bunch of rich black people going to bad schools. It's poor black people, right?
Yeah.
So who's making black people poor?
Well, that's the question, right?
That's the question. I think it's Democratic Party policies that have decimated the black community. Excuse me. You and I are totally on the same page with this because I agree with you completely. I think everyone agrees that we have a huge imbalance of the education system in this country as it pertains to poor people, and there's a largely disproportionate number of black people that are poor. And it's terrible, and it shouldn't be that way. But I don't think that black people are poor because white people hate them or because white people want them to be undereducated.
I'm not saying that.
Well, I'm not saying you're saying that.
But in terms of history, racist policies have been passed down from Jim Crow era, and certain things have been instituted to keep people of color down. A good example is the 13th Amendment, where it abolishes slavery, and in a little line at the bottom of the end of the sentence, it says, for those that are incarcerated, they will still continue to do basically involuntary servitude. So, a lot of people like to call that the loophole for slavery, and how that has been passed down and trickled down into our current society, where people of color, or blacks, aren't given the same type of fairness in our current society just based on the color of their skin, just because of a racist policy that's been passed down from Jim Crow.
I don't understand that. How has that portion of the Constitution directly, how's it affected you, say?
Okay, so the Constitution, basically a bunch of people are put into positions where they're jailed. Basically any crime that a person who is black was doing at that time, they would get arrested, they would get put into jails, and then that's how we have things like mass incarceration.
No, it isn't.
I'm done.
Well, it isn't. I mean, you're making it sound like mass incarceration is generational. You're born in prison. People get put in prison because they commit crimes. That's okay.
I mean, just watch 13. Michelle Alexander.
Okay.
Hello.
Good. Hi.
My name is Marissa. Sorry, I sound a little sick. I have 2 questions. I'm not sure if my question was it's basically related to his. One of my questions is, if your view that the left is manipulating people, or that you're saying that people of color, gays, LGBT, and minor groups of that sort have a victim mentality or oppression or intersectionality, those terms, why are people in the left still fighting for those to this day? And people are dying for those things. If it's not true, then what do you what is your stance on that? I don't understand how you could say I want to say you said you're not saying it's not true, but why are people still doing those things if you believe that it's not true?
Well, first of all, what are they fighting for, and who's dying?
Basic human rights.
What rights don't they have? What rights don't you have, for instance, that I have? We don't have to make it personal. What rights?
No, it's fine. It's fine. Never mind. Another question I have is from one of my friends. She said, what are some things that the Republican Party is doing for these marginalized groups?
Oh, well, for starters, they're lowering your taxes. They're giving you bigger paychecks. They're increasing your safety. They're securing your country's borders to make sure that you don't have people coming into your neighborhoods and to your country who may be smuggling drugs or maybe escaping a past of killing and raping women. Everything that they're doing for me and him and you and you and you, they're doing for you too. Meanwhile, your other option, there's a Green Party, there's Independents and Libertarian, but let's be real. When it comes to a presidential general election, there are really 2 party choices. And that other, well, let's just look at the candidates going into 2020. Kamala Harris just recently introduced an anti-lynching bill into Congress. The last time a person was lynched in this country was in 1981, which I sort of shocked that even happened that late. But I mean, these policies and initiatives are designed to make you believe that this is a real, true, legitimate threat and a problem that's happening in this country. These people want you to believe that your racial status, I just asked you a second ago, what rights don't you have? And you didn't have an answer, but they want you to believe that you don't. They want you to believe that you're lacking rights. They want you to believe that you're lacking control over your own life. They want you to believe that you're lacking any ability to change the course of your life based off of your gender, your sexual, or the color of your skin. I don't know your sexual orientation. But the Republican Party does not do that. The Republican Party does not ever tell you that you don't have a shot in this country because of the color of your skin. The Republican Party is saying, go out, educate yourself, work hard, try hard, do hard, and you just might make it in this country because a lot of people do. And I mean, we have example after example after example of people who have come from situations much worse than mine or yours or other people here and have pulled themselves up despite the color of their skin or their gender or sexual orientation and made something terrific out of their lives under the system that we have in America.
Don't you feel that's like on an individualistic basis, because most people that I know have not had that same experience because of their skin or because of their sexuality, because of their origin. So wouldn't you say that's like very individualized?
Yeah, I would. It's awesome. Please embrace your individual identity. It's great. Stop sitting around with groups of people who tell you you're a victim because of the color of your skin. Walk away from the groupthink. Walk away from the tribal mentality. Walk away from all of your friends who keep telling you they're all out to get us, that we can't succeed, we don't have a chance. Walk away from all of it. Yeah, be an individual. It's awesome. You'll do really great in life.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Alright, well that concludes our Q&A. Thank you guys so much for coming. We really appreciate everyone that came. And we really appreciate Brendan for coming. This was great.
Thank you.
Really eye-opening, and I think a lot of people learned a lot tonight. You know, we hope to continue this dialogue as a political organization on campus. We really hope to kind of bridge divides, kind of, you know, work together and really get out of a lot of the groupthink mentalities that exist on campus and really just like, you know, get to know each other more and really have that open dialogue. And I really thank Brendan for coming here.
Thank you.
Because I really think you started this conversation that we've wanted to have for a long time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I would really like to encourage everybody here to, in a moment when they're feeling like they want to, you know, open their mind a little bit and maybe, thank you, and you know, just ingest a little bit of information that maybe you typically wouldn't normally ingest. Please go to YouTube and just type in #walkaway, or go specifically to our channel, Walkaway Campaign. Testimonial after testimonial after testimonial of people telling their stories, and just listen to why these people are walking away. But what I really, really want people to do is go on YouTube and for free, type in The Great Awakening, Breaking the Chains of the Democratic Party. It's only 35 minutes long. It is a walkaway documentary using the walkaway testimonials of 20 Black Americans who are telling their stories about how they feel that the Democratic Party has destroyed this community, that they have been lied to by the liberal media, they've been lied to by the Democratic Party, and they are walking away. And I just want you to hear from their own minds and their own mouths what they have to say. And I really encourage everyone to please watch that. Thank you all very much.